I am 16 years old, and I never expected this to happen to me. I would like to point out that this doesn't only happen to women. 2 days ago I was coming home from school. The bus that the students get on goes to the center of the city. I get on it, and then I take another bus to get to my stop, where I have to walk maybe 200 or 300 meters from my house. I would take the bus from school to the center, and then wait at my stop. There were kids from other schools there, and the creep wearing the hat kept looking at me. I ignored him by putting on my headphones. This went on for about 10 minutes until the bus pulled up. I forgot about the guy, but I was still scared. I got on the bus and took an empty seat. I noticed that the guy also got on the bus and started walking toward me. My red flags weren't up yet, but I looked anyway, just in case. He took the seat behind me and then the bus moved to the next stop. I heard something in the background of my music. I turned the volume down and heard a voice behind me, the same fucking guy. I pressed pause and heard him ask, "Hey, I think we live near each other. Could you tell me what stop we should get off at?" Sure, you'd think it was stupid of me to tell them the truth, but it would be a bit of an asshole move to tell them bullshit if he lives next door to me. The bus pulled up to the bus stop, which is 5 or 6 stops away from my house. I moved to another seat, indicating that I needed to get off the bus. The creep moved. Damn it. He's lying and following me. Then I waited for one of the busiest stops, and God be with me because there was a crowd of teenagers who were probably going to smoke and drink. As soon as the doors opened, I ran away from the bus, crossed the road, and walked into a random store. I kept my head down and stared out the window. As soon as the students dispersed, I looked for the creep and saw him looking at me. I took off my sweatshirt and put it in my bag. I then went to the bathroom to wet my hair. I ruffled my hair to look a little different, and then walked out of the store. I walked for a long time to the next stop, turning every chance I got. After walking for a while, I went into a small cafe and waited for a while. I texted my father to come pick me up. He asked me why and I told him everything. He picked me up right away and took me home. I don't know who this guy was or what he was doing. I don't think he lives near me, and I hope he doesn't. But whatever it is, I hope we never see each other again. My freshman year, I had to commute 30 to 45 minutes from home to campus and back. Before the semester started, my parents and I checked out the dorms near campus, but they were pretty expensive, and I didn't really want to share a room with 2 other people. My mom, who was an accountant, calculated the approximate monthly expenses I would incur if I rented a room instead of staying at home and traveling. The latter option turned out to be less favorable. So the decision was made, and frankly, I could stand to spend a few hours traveling and chatting with my future roommates. All kidding aside, I didn't really mind the arrangement. Of course, I woke up at 5 a.m. so I wouldn't be late for my 7:30 a.m. class. I also used the travel time to cram notes and do assignments I hadn't had time to finish or even start. It took a little practice to get my handwriting just right, taking into account all the bumps and bruises from the car ride. But once I got the hang of it, my blockmates treated me like a boss. But that's not the point. This incident happened around 6:30 in the evening. I don't remember the exact date, but I'm pretty sure it was a Friday. On the campus where I went to school, Friday was Civics Day, and the rest of the week we had to wear school uniforms. I wore a cute pink top with ruffles around the neck, paired with jeans and low-heeled shoes of the same color. When I rode the bus, I had a privileged seat. The seat right behind the driver. At that time, I was paranoid with unhealthy thoughts because I had witnessed a horrible car accident that killed 22 people. I thought that if we got into an accident, the driver would instinctively steer the bus to the side and then I would feel safer. As I boarded the bus, I saw a handful of passengers sitting in their seats, minding their own business. Relieved to see that my favorite seat wasn't taken, I walked over and sat down, plugged in my headphones, and looked out the window. I barely noticed the guy sitting next to me. I only saw him in my peripheral vision. My phone vibrated. My mom was asking me what I wanted for dinner. I quickly typed my answer and put my phone back in my backpack, which was on my lap. The guy used his jacket as a blanket and covered my forehead, crossing his arms over his chest. I didn't pay much attention because it was already dark outside and the poor guy must have been tired. But then I felt something touch my right side, making me jump. It was his knuckles. I tried to convince myself that it was just an accident. His eyes were closed. I shifted in my seat, trying to put more distance between us. I'm pretty lanky, so it wasn't hard. The bus finally started moving, and the man handing out tickets started making his rounds. The man asked me where I was going before giving me the ticket, and when he asked the guy next to me, he said the same city. I immediately got a strange feeling, but I thought it was just a coincidence. I felt uncomfortable because I counted 4 times when Knuckles patted my arm. I started to get worried. On the 4th time, his knuckles touched my chest. At that point, I practically clenched my teeth. I decided to hug my backpack so he wouldn't accidentally hit my breast again. I thought he would stop at this point and realized that he was pressing his closed fist against my side. And then I was convinced of his intentions. No matter how much I blocked his arm with my back, he kept swinging. Asshole. I may be an introvert, but when I'm pissed off, I get really loud. I shifted back in my seat and saw that he was already awake, a satisfied grin on his face. I fought the urge to scratch that smug face. I took a deep breath and took off my headphones before I said loudly, "If you're trying so hard to touch a flat-chested girl, I feel sorry for you." All heads in the car turned in our direction as we pulled up to the waiting carport. And while I was thinking why the fuck I had to say those words, the asshole just took off. He hadn't even paid the fare and we were already far from our destination. There was a stunned silence. But then the driver shook his head and started grumbling, looking at the sliding door that the jerk had just climbed out of. The passenger, a sweet old lady, asked me if I was okay, and I just nodded silently. I may have chased the maniac away, but I managed to embarrass myself in the process. Fortunately, there were only a few passengers inside. The driver told me to put my bag next to me and I wouldn't be charged for the seat. I was grateful for the gesture. The next 15 minutes passed without incident, and when I jokingly told the story to my parents at dinner, I realized the full extent of the situation. I was being sexually assaulted. A man was attacking me even as I tried to stop his advances. I slept restlessly that night, thinking unhealthy thoughts. What if I kept quiet and he got off at the same stop as me? What if he intended to do terrible things to me? What if I died that day? I overreacted. I know, but it took me weeks to fully recover from that trauma. My dad had to put up with me and drive me to and from school until I stopped being so paranoid. That's when I started working. Having my own car became a priority for me. Now I don't take the bus anymore. One night, around 7 or 8 o'clock, I was taking the bus home from the store. It's a route I take regularly, so I usually recognize some of the people on it. Anyway, this guy, who I had never seen before, got on the bus a few stops after me. He's probably in his early 40s, and he's wearing construction clothes. He keeps looking at me like he recognizes me or something, so I just give him a fake smile, hoping he'll stop. Instead, he takes it as an invitation to strike up a conversation. He starts asking me all these annoying questions to which I give the most banal answers. I'm hoping that maybe he'll realize he's making me uncomfortable and leave me alone. Instead, he invites me for a drink. I say, "No thanks, I'm underage." To which he replies something like, "That's okay, I don't mind, and then maybe I can join you at home." I think he went on to explain that we could watch a movie and he'd make me the best drink I've ever had. But I stopped him and told him that I felt uncomfortable and I didn't want to talk to him anymore. I put on my headphones and watched him out of the corner of my eye for the rest of the ride. Every time someone stopped the bus, he would look back to see if I was getting off. When my stop finally came, I felt pretty uncomfortable, but I pulled the cord anyway. As soon as I started to gather my things, he also started to move, as if he wanted to get off. When I got up, he got up too. I waited for him to get off the bus and sat back in my seat as the bus pulled away. I saw that he was still standing at the bus stop waiting for me. I decided to take the bus for another 2 hours to eliminate the possibility that he was still waiting, and then hurried home. I admit that he could have just been a harmless stranger who happened to get off at that stop. But that seems unlikely to me, frankly. It seems very strange to me that I've never seen them before or again, even on the same bus at the same time. In retrospect, I probably should have at least reported it to the police, just in case. But I was just so overwhelmed by the whole situation that I didn't even think about it. Ironically, just a few months later, I ran into another stranger at an intersection near my bus stop who turned out to be wanted for assault. And a few months after that, another guy told me he'd buy me anything I wanted, as long as it didn't cost more than $7,000, at a crosswalk at the same damn intersection. The funny thing is, nothing like that had ever happened to me before. And nothing like that has happened since. It's just been a weird couple of months, I guess. It happened about a year ago. I was 22 years old at the time. Although I'm not pretty, I have a baby face and I'm regularly approached by all sorts of pedophiles. With makeup, I hardly look legitimate. And in my normal teenage years, my height is about 5 feet 3 inches, and I usually wear somewhat baggy clothes, which adds to my childish appearance, I think. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, I boarded the bus. I usually get on and somehow manage to get a seat at the next stop. I looked around, trying to see who had gotten on the bus, to see if there were any elderly people or just anyone who seemed to need a seat more than I did. And then I noticed this simple-looking man. He was casually but decently dressed, somewhere between thin and slim, and he had a short haircut, probably to hide the fact that he was starting to go bald, I thought. But what I remembered most were his eyes. He was looking right at me. It made me uncomfortable, because most people in similar situations look away after a while. Now I know I'm prone to paranoia, so right after I turned away and looked out the window, I tried to reason rationally. Maybe he was just tired after a long day at work and didn't look at me and just dropped me without even realizing it. It had happened to me before, but there was something off about the look in his eyes. It didn't seem empty or tired or distant. It was intense. I swear we looked back at him to see that he was looking back at me with the same intense scrutiny. I tried to pretend that I was just looking around and then turned back to the window. I could see his reflection in the glass, so I kept my eyes on him. I didn't feel fear, just anxiety. There were a lot of people on the bus. It was still a few stops from my stop, and I was still telling myself that. I was just paranoid. The next stop came. And then the next one. And the next. He didn't get off. The only thing that changed was that there were significantly fewer people on the bus, and he took a seat 2 rows in front of me. However, instead of facing forward like a normal person, he was facing sideways, which gave him a good view of me and the doors. I thought about getting off at the earlier stop and just walking home, but quickly discarded that idea as it might give him more opportunity to corner me somewhere if he had to try to follow me. So on to the next plan. I tried to pretend not to notice his gaze. I wasn't sure how convincing that was, because most of the time when I tried to fake something, I got a perfect blind poker face. He didn't change his behavior though, and I tried to tell myself that at least I didn't feel like he was scaring me. I was close to my stop and decided to wait and get off at the last moment. When the bus stopped and the doors opened, I looked out and then back. I saw his body tense up for a second. A few people started to get on and I saw him relax again. After the last person sat down, I quickly got up and walked out with a smile on my face. I thought I had beaten him. Unfortunately, he jumped up almost at the same time I did and managed to jump off as well. Damn it. Not only had I already managed to lose him, but he definitely knew that I was trying to get away from him. I had no doubt that he would follow me now. I didn't know what to do. My house was only 300 meters away, but I didn't want him to know where I lived. Besides, As cliché as it may sound, I live on a small, somewhat secluded street that is poorly lit and where there are few people at night. It doesn't even have sidewalks. That should give you an idea of the amount of traffic on it. My last hope was the crossroads I had to go through. Let me draw it for you, because that is what saved me. I got off the bus, walked down a bit, and crossed the street to the left. Then I had to wait for the green light and cross again. Then I just walked up the hill for about 150 meters. And then down the first street to the left for another 100 meters. That's how it went. When the light turns red for the cars to my left, it's still green for the cars coming from the right. After about 15 seconds, I don't know, it turns red for them too. And after another 5 to 10 seconds, it turns green for pedestrians to cross. I couldn't be sure because this isn't a small town or neighborhood where I live, but I was hoping he wasn't a local and didn't know about traffic lights. So I tried to act calm and pretend not to notice that he was always 2 meters behind me like a damn not-so-obvious shadow. Fortunately, there wasn't too much traffic on my right, but there was still traffic. I waited for the next car. Not too close and not too far. Just enough so that I could run across the street, but so that he couldn't follow right behind me. I remember hoping he wasn't from around here again before I started running. I guess he didn't expect that. I quickly looked back and saw that he had started to cross, but then fell behind because there was still traffic coming from the right. At this point, my work doubled and I made my way to the bus stop, which is right on the corner of my street. I'm pretty short, so I made my way through the crowd that had just formed, hoping he would lose sight of me since most of them were taller than me. I made it to my street, but I realized he was keeping up. I didn't want to run straight to my house because he could easily spot me. I decided to lurk between 2 parked cars at the corner. I thought it would be a good place to hide. The street was dimly lit, and I could peek out the car window, but he couldn't easily see me. After a few seconds, he was right on the corner. I could see that he was breathing easily, and they were just standing there. He was looking down my street, as if trying to make out CFR somewhere in the distance. Even though it was dark, I was so afraid he would somehow see me. Then he walked ahead with the same expression on his face. I didn't dare move. And after what seemed like an eternity, he decided not to walk down my street, but up. But I still didn't move. I kept thinking what a stupid decision he made. There was no way I could go up fast enough for him to see me if I went that way. I was afraid he would notice and come back after a while. I honestly don't know how much time passed, maybe just a few seconds. I decided it would be stupid to wait for him to come back. So I just hurried home. Once inside the house, I made sure everything was locked up, and I've never been so happy to see my dad home. In hindsight, I could have just called my dad and asked him to pick me up at the bus stop. I don't know why that thought never crossed my mind. It would have been the more sensible thing to do. But anyway, I'm glad I'm okay. And he didn't catch up with me. It happened when I was in high school, my freshman or sophomore year. So around 14 or 15 years old, but still looked much younger. I still took the city bus to school because, again, no school buses went to my neighborhood. My mom could drop me off at that time, but she started work at 8 and my school started at 9, so I didn't feel like being at school around 7:15. That morning I get on the bus as usual. It's not empty, but not because I was a member of JROTC in high school, and that day was uniform day, so I wore my uniform. If you've ever seen a woman's military uniform, you know it's the most unflattering thing in the world. I bring this description in case there are chock-a-bocs out there who think that what you're wearing when they sneak up on you matters. So, I'm sitting in my seat, surrounded by my huge backpack and guitar case in music class. Suddenly this dude materializes in front of me. I look up and see this guy. Average height, covered in hair, skinny, with the face of a drug addict, so he could be between 20 and 40. He stands awkwardly in front of me and then reaches out and holds a folded piece of paper in front of me. He gestured for me to take it, and it's so early in the morning and I was so confused that I took it. and he walks away. I open it and I read it. It's a note he wrote to me. "Hi, my name is Crip, and I've been watching you for a while now, but I'm gonna be changing buses soon. So here's my phone number, call me and write it down." I barely have time to digest what I've read and I can feel his eyes burning through me. I spread my stuff on the empty seats around me like a barrier. And as my stop approached, I got off the bus. I ran to the ROTC building where I usually spent time before school. As I burst into the building, I practically grabbed one of the ROTC instructors and huddled against him, shaking like a leaf and crying, holding a note and talking incoherently. Our instructor was obviously retired military. He took the note from me, read it, and looked at me very sternly. He sat me down in a chair and walked me over to the school phone on the desk. He calmly doubled the number and the stupid, creepy bastard answered. My teacher asked if his name was Crip. The guy said it was. Then he quickly told him he was my dad and asked, "Why the fuck did you, a grown man, give my 14-year-old kid your number?" Basically, the creep just went off on his own and my instructor spewed threats based on his former military experience until he heard the guy was about to shit his pants. He finally told me never to contact him and hung up, then smiled broadly and hugged me. At that moment, I was smiling through my tears after listening to his tirade. I called my mom and told her what had happened. She came to the school as we were leaving and filed a police report. I told her I would never get on a city bus again and I didn't care if I had to get to school 2 hours early. I wanted her to give me a ride until I could drive. So that's what happened. That teacher was always my favorite, and I still go to him after I graduate from college. I can imagine him telling this story at my wedding one day. It was really crazy. So first, a little backstory for you guys. First of all, this happened to my little sister, who was the best thing that ever happened to me. I love her more than anything. There's a 10-year difference between us at the time of these events. She was 10 and I was 20. I was also in college, 2 hours away from home, which made the situation even more nerve-wracking for me. Another important fact is that my mother runs a home daycare, and during this time one of the children my mother was keeping rode home on the bus with my sister. For the protection of the children, I will refer to my sister as my sister, and the child my mother was keeping as his age. I promise all these facts will come together. So, one day after school, my sister is walking to her bus to go home. She ends up getting on the wrong bus and realizes it when she goes up the stairs and realizes it's not the same group of kids as our regular bus. She turns to get off and walk to the right bus when the driver stops her and tells her to get on. My sister explained that she had gotten on the wrong bus, but the driver adamantly told her that was not the case and that she should get on the bus. Then my sister, being young and afraid of trouble, gets on and starts freaking out inside. At 4:30, when the kids usually get off the bus at my parents' house, H gets off the bus as usual. She tells my mom that my sister didn't get on the bus that day, and my mom starts to panic. At this point, my sister has already been on the wrong bus for an hour and a half, and according to her, he never made any attempt to contact her. And this is where the story gets really disturbing. After discovering her absence, my mother calls the school and informs them that my sister did not get off the bus. After they confirm that my sister didn't accidentally ride in the car with the group, they start calling all the buses on the radio. At some point before the radio call comes in, my sister is the last child on the bus. The bus driver still hasn't asked her where she lives or even her name, but he keeps going. My sister hears the radio caller ask if there is a student named my sister on the bus. At this point, my sister spoke up and told the driver that she was and that she was on the wrong bus. The bus driver did not respond in any way to her words or to the radio call. To be clear, we don't know when my sister became the last child. We also don't know where he was driving or where he was going. The only points in the timeline that we know for sure are that she got on the bus at 3 o'clock, got off the bus between 4:32 and 4:45, and that the first radio call was probably made about 10 minutes after she got off the bus. The school contacted my mom and told her that none of the bus drivers still on their routes had picked up my sister, and that most of the buses had already returned to the bus garage. While they were telling my mom this, they made another radio contact with the buses and the bus drivers still did not respond. It was around this time that my father came home from work. When they got a call back from the school, they reported that they had found our bus. Both the school staff and my parents were furious. My mom even wanted to send my dad to look for the buses. The school sent people to search the classrooms and bathrooms in case it was somehow left unattended. They also sent someone to the bus garage to check the buses in case she got on the wrong one and fell asleep or something. They also made another radio call to the few buses that were still running. This time, my sister's bus driver answered that he had her on his bus. He was told to go back to the garage where my mother would meet him and pick up my sister. To this day I am very grateful that they didn't give her my address. Instead, it was about 6 o'clock when the bus pulled up to the garage. So my sister was obviously pretty shaken up after spending about 3 hours with this pathetic semblance of a human being. My mom didn't know the whole story yet, so she didn't confront the driver about it. When they got home, my sister told my parents the story, and they realized it could have been much worse. My mother calls me and tells me the story after everything has happened. I will never forget the oppressive silence after she finished telling me what had happened. To this day, I feel a weight of horror in my stomach when I think about what this person could have done. When the fear still lingered, I spoke to my sister on the phone. Her words were enough to break my heart. I sobbed when we hung up, just like her big sister. I just wanted to take away her pain. The next day, my mother called to complain about the driver and tell the story of my sister's horrible bus ride. She was told that he had just started working for them a week ago and would look into the situation. I honestly don't remember if they gave her the driver's name or not. I do know that the guy quit a week later, apparently just stopped showing up unannounced. That year, my sister got an iPhone for her birthday, and my mom forbade her from bringing it to school. After that happened, my mom made her carry it in the bottom of her book bag every day in case something like that happened again. I am very grateful that my sister made it home safely that night, because I know that many stories like this don't end in a reunion, even though I am grateful. I am also angry that this man had the nerve to put my sister through such an ordeal. I can't even imagine life without my sister. But every now and then I like to imagine beating the crap out of that bus driver. A few years ago, I was traveling back home. I usually take the bus, even though I hate it when strangers get too close. But I don't have a driver's license, so I don't have much of a choice. Anyway, I'm sitting by the window listening to music and a man sits down next to me. I didn't pay much attention. The bus was pretty full. I move a little closer to the window so the man doesn't get too close. I notice that he keeps looking at me and I feel very uncomfortable. So of course I look out the window and try to ignore him. At this point I start to get really nervous. Luckily, we were getting close to my stop. As the bus pulls up to the stop, I stagger a bit and stand halfway up. As far as I know, this is a normal social signal to strangers on the bus that I want to get off at this stop and that they should let me pass their seat. But this guy doesn't see it that way. So I take out my headphones and politely tell him that I need to get off, stop, and ask him to let me pass. He just smiles and says, "No, I don't want to pass him because then he'll have direct access to my body." And now I'm really worried. I think he sees this and takes up even more space so I can't get past him. I also notice that he looks very unkempt and about twice my age. Besides, I'm a pretty petite girl and don't look threatening or anything. So I say again that I need to get off, this time very loudly so that the other passengers can hear me and help me if necessary. The man lets me through, but still doesn't give me a seat. When I finally get off and walk to my apartment, I notice that he is walking behind me. I'm getting scared. It's winter, and even though it's not late, it's very dark and there's not much going on in the city. I call my friend and ask if I can go to her house. That way the man won't know where I live. We talk on the phone all the way to her place. When I finally arrive, I turn around for the first time. The man is still there, smiling at me. Back at the apartment, we keep looking out the window. But the man is still gone. Later, my boyfriend walks me home. I haven't seen the man since, but I'm still nervous about taking the bus. And I always try to be as close to the driver as possible. When I was in middle school, I took the city bus to school because my parents couldn't drive me and the school buses didn't go to my neighborhood. I didn't live in the best neighborhood, but I never felt safe. That morning I got on the bus to go to school for the 6th grade. I was about 12 years old. But let me tell you, I always looked much younger than my age. There were a lot of people on the bus. So I go to my usual seat in the back. I go a couple of stops and a man comes and sits next to me. It's been about 10 years, but I still remember him. Tall, thin, Hispanic with long, straight black hair. There were maybe 1 or 2 empty seats, so it wasn't surprising that he ended up next to me. At first I just thought he took the first available seat. Then he started talking to me. I don't remember what he said, but since it was early in the morning and I was already annoyed at having to share a seat with him, I just made vague, disinterested noises. Then he asked me where I was going. This is where my spider quivered, because obviously it was early in the morning and I'm a kid, so I'm going to school. So I said school and walked away. I realized now that he was probably waiting for me to tell him which school. A few stops went by and there were some empty seats on the bus, so I quickly went and found another empty seat. Not 5 minutes later he follows me and sits down next to me again, still trying to get me to talk to him. He asks my name. I look to the front of the bus and see several 8th graders I know from school and from riding this bus. My animal brain screams at me to find a safe place in the park. I walk to the front of the bus and sit in the middle of them, squeezing in and looking them in the eye for help. The guy moves again and sits down right in front of me. He asks my name again and one of the guys I'm sitting with, G, quickly calls me by an alias and turns his whole body around. In this way he sort of shuts me out and carries on a conversation with me until we reach our school. A group of 8th graders formed a circle around me. We got off the bus, and I turned around to make sure Crib didn't follow us off the bus. Fortunately, he didn't. But for the next few weeks, I took either a later or an earlier bus in case he was on it again. And since the bus stop was right across the street from my school, I was afraid he knew where I was going and would show up there. Fortunately, I never saw him again. Thank God.